I think a lot of my clients over the years have wished they would have not just focused on their 401k, but actually investing in non-retirement accounts to provide more flexibility for earlier retirements.
Today's topic is really a plethora of topics. We're going to talk about how do you compare. We're going to talk about Florida domicile. We're going to talk about retirement. Really a lot to unpack today. And so I think, we're getting ready to wrap up season. And season's really the time when most people come to visit and who may have a home here and stay for some period of time. Some are residents and have a residence here. Others have officially domiciled and declared Naples or Florida their primary resident. And there are a lot of reasons why our clients do that. Tom, over the years, we've seen ebbs and flows in terms of people coming to town and it being more popular from a tax perspective. How would you say you've seen the people change in terms of net worth and what a typical person who declares domicile look like?
Sure. When I came to Naples, over 40 years ago, people that spent just a few number of months here, did not spend more than 6 months, and then they went back up north. And over the years, I've seen that change. It's become a sleepy little fishing village where people now can say, "Well, I'd like to spend here, make this my domicile, make this my home." And so I've seen the demographics change, where we're more of a retirement community, and now we get an influx of more young entrepreneurs. Maybe have had a liquidity event, a private equity event, or sold their business and are moving to Naples and been making it their permanent home and spending 8 to 12 months a year there. So we have less of a transient, seasonal group.
Obviously, it takes quite a bit of money in terms of living these days. And my gosh, inflation's gone up. I'm not sure that everybody has adequately planned for that in their retirement. And one of the things that I hear a lot of clients ask is, gee, am I ready? Have I saved enough? How much is enough? Those are things that I think a lot of people struggle with.
There's no one real answer. It all depends on your lifestyle, your spending needs, your what you want to do in retirement. Some people live well within their means. Some people are looking to be philanthropic or donate to family members or travel, and their idea of a good retirement would require a larger net worth than others. So not an easy answer. It's a very personal question.
Well, it's a painful one for me because I realize based on lifestyle and my family, I can probably never retire.
Most people don't think they have enough, and our job is to show them that based on reasonable spending habits and lifestyle and reasonable returns and proper allocation, it's better than they feared that they will have enough to enjoy. Because we're not planning for 50 years anymore. We're planning for a shorter time horizon.
I would think we would be planning for longer time horizons with the fact that healthcare and medicine, that people are living longer and having more vibrant lives.
One thing with the average person coming to Naples is probably in their 60s and 70s, and so we're planning for 20, 30-year time horizon versus someone that's in their 40s and 50s, and that's a longer period of time. Inflation has more of an effect on their portfolio, their lifestyle. 60s, 70s, 80s, well, usually their distribution rate can be a little higher than maybe a normal, because again, we're not worried about underperforming for a 30-year period where you would deplete the principal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I heard something recently that people spend more time each year obsessing and planning a vacation, which is a week, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks if you're lucky, than they do what will be a 30-year retirement. I thought that was pretty astonishing. And then I kind of thought, well, how much time do I really think about that? It's interesting to see two people, two clients, and I can think about some of ours that are and 80 or 90 years old, and one is exceptionally conservative because they're 80 or 90, and the other said, I'm 80 or 90, I've got 10 years left. I can be aggressive and really try to grow my assets. And it's so interesting where you can have two people, same age, similar net worths, and have different perspectives on their wealth and what they want to do with it.
If you're getting up every night worrying about the market, how it affects your retirement savings, then probably you're taking too much risk. And most people underrate the amount of risk they can take. And we want to sort of counsel them. But to your point, Don, is I see many people in their 80s that start investing for their children or for their grandchildren because they have enough of a net worth or what I call critical mass. Even with a really downturn in the market, they have more than enough to last many more years than life expectancy. So they start investing the money for the children. Other people, same age, they get very nervous at that age. They're looking at it for how it affects their retirement, even though they have the same net worth, the same family circumstances, but they perceive the same amount of money differently.
All right. So it seems to me that, this dovetails really nicely into Trent, who is going to join us to discuss retirement distribution rates, all the intricacies that we should be considering and contemplating those years as we're nearing retirement. Trent, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we're so happy to have you.
Good to have you.
Why don't we kind of transition back to the topic of retirement, distribution, things to consider, issues that people overlook, and some of the intricacies as it relates to retirement and what you see as a planner and best practices.
There's a lot to cover, but I'll try to keep it fairly straightforward and simple. When it comes to figuring out if I have enough, how much do I distribute from my accounts, it really starts with creating a financial plan and really trying to figure out retirement timing off of how you want to live your lifestyle. Where do we want to live? Do we want to live in Florida? Do we want to live in Florida full-time, part-time? So there's a lot of planning that needs to go into figuring out that distribution amount or how much you actually need saved. And but rule of thumbs, I think everyone has heard of the 4% rule at some point in their saving career.
And for those who may not have heard it, what is the 4%?
From a high level, 4% of your retirement accounts, you can distribute that, and that could be sustainable for the course of your retirement.
And I've heard people talk about that, and then I've heard the 4%, you start with 4% year one, and then you adjust it for inflation moving forward. Is that common, or is that more problematic?
I wouldn't say it's problematic. It's definitely a way to stress test your plan by accounting for inflation. Me personally, I'm not a fan of the 4% rule. I think it's a good benchmark. I think it's a good starting point. I like the dynamic approach, dynamic spending approach, which means as your account fluctuates up and down, your paycheck, your retirement paycheck can fluctuate up and down as well. It's a little bit more predictable. It's easier to get through the tough times. If you're taking into consideration your accounts might be down a little bit, because believe it or not, markets will correct every now and again, as we're experiencing currently. So when it comes to a distribution rate, it's common for me to see anywhere from 3% to maybe upwards of 6%, depending on what stage you are in retirement. One of my points here is the go-go, slow-go, no-go years, which I think some people are familiar with. But essentially what it means is most retirees spend a little bit more early on in their retirement than they do later on in their retirement. So that is what's called the go-go years. And then it starts to slow down, and then maybe some no-go, where you're at home a little bit more, you're not traveling the world like you used to, you've kind of done everything on your bucket list. So accounting for inflation and understanding that your spending will change over time is really important.
And, I think we see that a lot with clients. And I think that brings up an interesting point that risks in retirement. So often clients think about portfolios, they think about the markets, but the risks outside your portfolio that are in your retirement years, healthcare, all of the long-term care issues, things of that nature. When someone's going through a financial plan and really planning that out, how do you account for that? What are some of the considerations as it relates to that?
Yeah. There's many things to stress test. And I think it all comes down to the individual's specific situation. Depending on your health, your level of wealth, your risk tolerance, it all comes down to your individual financial plan. But from a high level, when it comes to your portfolio, we oftentimes see a lot of people taking on not enough risk. And I think the default for years has been fixed income, bonds. You need the 60/40. You own your age in bonds. And that's kind of a cookie cutter way to de-risk a portfolio. And we don't have to get into the details of complete diversification today, but having a diversified portfolio that meets your specific financial planning needs is the most important.
And having your fixed income weighting increase as you get older would not have been very successful. Certainly not the last decade, where bonds have underperformed dramatically equities, and so that would not have been a good plan. So it's I agree with you. A dynamic approach and something more reflective of the current environment is much more appropriate for clients. But where rates at historic lows, I mean, it just would not have bonds would not have been if you had primarily a bond portfolio, you would underperform your expected rate of return.
Well, and as it relates to planning, I read an article recently that talked about not enough people view their Social Security and that future income stream really as a bond. It's an inflation indexed bond, and really accounting for that in your asset allocation as opposed to just looking at it as an income stream.
Same if they have a pension. I consider a pension almost like a Social Security, that it's also from a reliable company. Your pension, Social Security really are safe fixed income assets, and then that allows you to invest more towards quality growth, which is a better inflation hedge over the long term.
Tell me what you see are some of the problems that people may have that they didn't seem obvious, didn't seem necessary for them to look at, and they got closer to retirement and it was, oh wow, we probably should have had our eye on this or that. What are some of the things that people overlook?
I would say one of the most common areas of financial planning is not having enough taxable account money, meaning non-retirement accounts. I think a lot of my clients over the years have wished they would have not just focused on their 401k, but actually investing in non-retirement accounts to provide more flexibility for earlier retirements. Another thing is considering the Roth bucket. I work with a lot of clients who are talking about, how do I minimize my RMDs? How do I distribute from my accounts in a tax efficient way? And gosh, I wish I would have ran the numbers and figured out, should I have actually contributed to my accounts post-tax as opposed to pre-tax? So those are a couple areas. The other thing is not actually understanding your budget heading into retirement. I think that's one thing that's overlooked is actually, for the person who maybe is a little bit more conscious of their spending, depending on your level of wealth. That's one thing that is definitely overlooked. And heading into retirement, knowing exactly how much is going out, how much is coming in, is really an important step that I feel like every pre-retiree or recent retiree should go through.
I agree with you about the retirement, focusing on the retirement IRAs and other retirement vehicles. That was always the thing that they emphasized for people. But with the change in tax laws and the elimination of the stretch IRA, and where you could stretch the IRA out for 30, 40 years after a person's passing, and then now the kids have to take the money out, non-spousal beneficiary, within 10 years. It's ordinary income, and these children are in their maximum earning years. And the last thing they need is more taxable income, where taxable assets get the benefit of step-up basis and capital gains rates. So I agree with you 100%. It's many people have focused just on their IRAs or retirement plans, and they should have focused on more of a balanced approach.
And hearing you talk about tax, obviously mitigating taxes in retirement's really critical because for most people, every dollar counts, and it's a different scenario than when they're working and there's plenty of income coming in. One of the things that so many people consider is domiciling and finding a location. I know one of your big points that you talk to a lot of retirees about is envision where you want to be, where you want to live, what you want to do. But part of that involves what state do you want to live in? Where is it that your hobbies, your avocations, those things are bountiful? And Florida is a state that is very popular, not just because of the sun or just because of the gray weather, but because of the tax advantages. And that can make a big difference when you're coming from a high tax state. How much of a difference can that make in terms of even just that domiciling and eliminating, in many areas, state, local, and municipal taxes on your income? Can that make a pretty sizable difference?
I've actually ran many different types of hypothetical scenarios where, let's just say somebody is relocating to Florida from California. Pretty common nowadays. It can make the difference of retiring earlier, several years earlier. So maybe keeping the same sort of lifestyle, but maybe retiring just a few years earlier. Their probability of success, meaning the odds of them running out of money in retirement or having to adjust their spending, making Roth conversions even more attractive because there's more dollars to allocate to the taxes coming from the conversion. So there's a lot of ways that even saving 4% or even upwards of 8 to 10%, depending on which state you live in total taxes, it can make a substantial difference in your tax planning and retirement as well.
Because that distribution rate you're referring to, those academic studies were based on achieving reasonable rates of return. And if you're paying extra tax that you could have avoided, that makes you would have to achieve a higher rate of return to compensate for that. So it's definitely an important thing to consider. That Florida, you don't pay that state income tax, so many people will come to Florida to avoid that.
And just to be devil's advocate, there are a couple other states that don't have state income tax. They're not as great as Florida, but there are a few out there.
The beaches and weather in Florida is another advantage.
We need to make sure we send this to Governor DeSantis when we finish here, because I think it's a great commercial for Florida. Lastly, people often don't think about retirement soon enough. I think it's pretty common by the time you hit 50, mid-50s, you begin to think about it a bit more. When you're young, you're having your kids, you're working, you're ascending the corporate ladder. But there have been a lot of studies that show that people who focus on it earlier have significantly higher successful outcomes. What are those things that maybe people slightly earlier in that retirement curve, say a 30-year-old or 40-year-old, what are some of those things that they can do early that really make a big difference?
I would say finding a good financial planner, an advisor, sooner than you might think is one of the best things that somebody, I'm going to be 35 here, anyone within my age range, that's a great time to find a financial planner, an advisor. because all of these things that we're talking about today and more, we can have those discussions and try to figure out how to build the amount of wealth that you need to accumulate to reach your financial goals. But I think building a financial plan beyond that, just putting together a plan and vision for your life as much as you can. And nobody can predict the future, and there's a lot of unknowns, but all we can do is put like a vision board in front of us and say, hey, this is what I'm 30, 40 years old. This is what I want my 40s to look like, maybe 50s and 60s. And then you can kind of work backwards from there to try and figure out, well, should I have a taxable investment account versus just saving into the 401k? And how much risk should I take on? What might be a future retirement distribution rate that would provide me the ability to retire, and how much do I need to save?
Do you want to talk a little bit about sequence of return? Because that's something that the client don't really understand.
The sequence of returns risk is something that a lot of pre-retirees might be going through right now.
In spades, right?
Right.
Exactly. And the last time it felt maybe like it was happening to recent retirees is during COVID. And I think that was, I had a lot of clients retire during COVID. But it's essentially 5 years to 7 years into retirement, the risk of the markets dropping, call it 20, 30, 40%, and disrupting how much you can spend over the next multiple decades. And so the risk is having a really bad first few years could really change the long-term trajectory, as opposed to having a really good first few years, and then maybe towards the end of retirement, it doesn't work out so well. So the best case scenario is to make sure that the first 5 to 7 years, give or take, you're set up to be as resilient and bulletproof as possible from a risk management perspective with your portfolio, how you're invested in the stock market, how much bond exposure you have, how much cash you might have, and really being diligent with asset allocation so that you don't expose yourself to that too much of a drawdown, which might cost you the retirement years on the back end.
Sounds great, sounds easy. Not so much. Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't know when those bad years are going to occur, and they occur in the first couple of years, and you're taking that 4% out. Let's say you started at, 07, the market dropped 57% in 17 months, and you're taking 4% out a year. You're so far depleted the principal, you really put yourself under pressure. But you take the same returns and go backwards, you could have taken out a significantly more than 4% because you had, a 10 good year average return. But again, since we don't know what scenario is going to play out, you have to show a bit on the more conservative side.
Well, the real world example of the sequence of return risk is from the year 2000 through, call it 2020. Because you went through 2 huge pullbacks in the market. And if you weren't diversified properly and you're taking out money from your account starting in the year 2000, you would have been broke and run out of money by around 2017, 2018. But if you were diversified and balanced and prudent with your asset allocation, you would still be compounding your wealth. So it is just a matter of, I think, the best piece of advice would be make sure you have a financial plan and you have a good financial planner helping you. Well,
and think about, I know in one of our previous podcasts, we discussed what it's like to have a lost decade, a decade of little to no return. And so that gets to your very good point of having the right allocation and ensuring there's enough yield in additional income that the markets may not give it to you.
So why it's such a complex, you have a combination of, are you taking the proper amount of risk to get the returns you need, but are you paying the least amount of taxes and the fees involved? And all those deplete the principal and force you to achieve even higher rates of return to meet your goals and objectives. Because I 100% agree, financial plans are critical. But the best financial plan in the world will fail if the investment returns are suboptimal, the fees are higher than should be, or the allocation is incorrect. So that's why that's one of the services that I think a really good financial planner offers.
We've covered a lot of material today. We've covered some of the considerations retirees need to contemplate earlier. We've talked about taxes. We've talked about domiciling. Tom, Trent, this is a successful landing. We thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on future.